All right, so here's what we do. This is we read papers and we talk about them and figure out what they have to say. As always, I feel this is my first time reading this too. So this is I'm already lost my mind. Suggested by Viper's Gratitude, and at the end we rate them. So feel free to like hang out, ask questions. I'll try to answer them if I can, and then we rate it at the end. It will go up on a site. And I'm gonna hope to work on that next week. Maybe get that up. I need to make a few more thoughts, but I have a paper I'm trying to get written by Sunday, so that's taking up all my free mental space at this point. Corwin Chelway says, the ability to reason about the minds of others feels like a parallel to the collapse of the bicameral mind. I have no idea, like, why the theory of mind would be a specific thing. Wait, what? Is this the wrong thing? And also, you would have to contend with the fact that we think squirrels now have a theory of mind. A few years ago, they did a study, and if squirrels believe they're being observed by other squirrels when they're burying their nuts, like hiding their nuts, they will fake bury and hide their nuts to like try to fool the other squirrel. And they'll do this up to 5 times to fake hide their nuts to fake out the other squirrel. But they don't care if a person's watching because they know people, well, I don't know what they know, but we assume that the squirrel understands that people don't steal squirrel nuts. Other squirrels steal squirrel nuts. So we think squirrels have a theory of squirrel mind. So if you are saying, well, we have a theory of, we have a theory of mind due to some fancy thing in our head. Well, do squirrels have a theory of mind due to these nuts, as Ivan brings up? Yeah. So, okay. But here we go. This is the cognitive psychology of belief in the supernatural in American Scientist, I believe. Yeah, this is American Scientist. And by Jesse M. Bering. Let me know. So here we go. One hot summer day several years ago, I holed up in a suffocating Fort Lauderdale hospital room. That sounds terrible, Jesse. Like, Fort Lauderdale's hot. The result of an especially virulent bout of the flu. Having nothing but the buzzing of dying flies and the sound of muted television game show applause to engage my interest, I turned my attention to the doleful lamentations of my elderly roommate, a handsome Navy veteran from World War II with a painfully defunct hip, and I gathered an even more painfully theological crisis on his hands. We were talking about this earlier. Like, I started because I'm working on some meta ethics. We were talking about, like, what happens when you have a crisis of ethics. It seems that he had been yanked from the bedside of his aged wife, and he feared that she'd die without him being there. Oh, that's really sad. To make matters worse, he had the sneaking suspicion that his son wanted to jettison him off to a nursing home after her death, away from their cherished house and the beautiful garden they'd cultivated for the last 20 years. Quote, I don't understand why God is doing this, end quote, he protested meekly to a sympathetic young nurse. Quote, we've always been good people, my wife and me. What did we do to deserve this, end quote. Author says, that's strange, I thought. Didn't I ask the same thing just the other day as I was crawling about on the bathroom floor, expelling bodily fluids that I didn't even know I had in me? Indeed, I could distinctly recall the feverish mantra, quote, oh God, please, no more, end quote. And I am not particularly religious. Just what was this connection between suffering and God all about anyway? This observation got me thinking about other existential experiences. What do we got? Don't the squirrels also forget where they bury their nuts? Yeah, they do sometimes. So smart enough to hide them. Well, they mostly remember, but not all the time. I forget what the percentage is on how often squirrels, forget where they bury their nuts, and then that's how you get new trees. Hide them so good, yes. The same way that I couldn't help thinking of God under dire circumstances, I've also found that I can't fathom what it would be like not to have an afterlife. Author says, I'm a materialist. I think consciousness ends with death. But nonetheless, try as I might, I run into a brick wall whenever I attempt to imagine what it would be like to be dead and not exist. I doubt I'm the only one. In the United States, as much as 95% of the population reportedly believes in life after death. Sometimes I lose track of D's nuts as well, says MDD. Well, don't sit on them. Yes, that's uncomfortable. Ugh. Yeah. You know, stupid things when you're a kid and you're a boy, you fucking nail your friends in the nuts. Be like, haha, it's funny. It's like, No, you don't do that. Okay. Author says, at least from a purely naturalistic perspective, one where we properly view ourselves as animals, such religious beliefs are an odd sort of thing. Not many people would classify their beliefs in God or heaven as supernatural, even though that's precisely what they are. Just what it is about the human mind that leads so many members of our species across cultures and geographic distances to hold such an unshakable, sober, and highly personal belief in an invisible, all-powerful being whom Westerners call God. Ivan says a lot of our animal behavior studies are very low quality. If you recall, the Coco the gorilla studies have been debunked. Yes, the gorilla studies have been, those were badly taken, they were taken down, like it was pretty bad. Viper says just check your mom, that's where everyone buries their nuts. Yeah, there we go. Now we've got the solution. And the squirrels too. On the face of it, this invisible being is a voyeur who knows all about you, an aloof sadist, as some people believe in the wake of personal misfortunes, a sexual totalitarian, and a personal friend, all rolled into one. The fact that normally none of this strange mix seems to strike us as bizarre may indicate that this trait has somehow had a deeper benefit for our species. I mean, the world sucks. The world, is hard. It's difficult to live. That you have some invisible thing that is, helping you or controlling stuff is a very comforting thought that there's some rhyme or reason to this. I'm on the side of chaos. The world's chaotic. Just get over it. Yeah. Mere desire to believe, or using Sigmund Freud's term, wish fulfillment, doesn't seem to cut it as an explanation of these traits. Why not? Okay. In studies the author has conducted, people's level of death anxiety didn't have much correlation with their type of religious belief. Yeah, I'm not talking about death anxiety. I'm talking about feeling like the world makes sense. I mean, you have to get to be a force ghost if it's true. What's not to like? Well, I mean, that's the nice stuff. But you see right here, they just said, it's not people's worry of death. People's level of death anxiety didn't have much correlation with their types of religious beliefs. I mean, on my opinion, it's more that people want to have control over their lives, to feel like that they're, having some sort of agency in a very complicated world. Corwin says, what are 3 things old world temples had going? Sacrifices, prostitutes, and tides. Yeah, well, what's important? Food, sex, and, money. So, that's the important stuff. Those with low fear of dying, for instance, are just as likely to be materialists as they are immortalists who believe in a consciousness after death. Religious beliefs could instead be a result of cultural indoctrination, a simple matter of exposure from birth to such ideas. But maybe it goes back even further than birth. Perhaps human minds have a genetic predisposition towards supernatural belief. So they're calling, this is going to be a genetic thing. It's biological. Has anyone ever meditated during their death or into death? I believe that there are Buddhist monks, read map, that they basically check out. They're all right, I'm going to die now. And then they meditate and eventually their bodily functions cease. I think that's a known phenomena. So you can look that up. Yeah, but again, you'd have to be good at meditating and stuff. Okay, to some, these questions are distasteful, even silly, because they suggest that God and the afterlife are phenomenological products of a mind rather than an objective reality. But in my view, a serious empirical analysis of the natural foundations of such supernatural beliefs is fair game for science. Being a psychologist, I began to wonder whether there were some way to collect empirical evidence to see whether belief in God and an afterlife is somehow natural, default state of human consciousness. But to understand why such a thing might have come about, we must first look at how evolution has influenced the human mind. Alright, and now I'm getting very, very scared. Because when we're going to talk about how evolution has influenced the human mind, a lot of this stuff is it's a lot of, I find it shaky. Okay. All right, evolutionary psychology. Yeah, there's a lot of people have problems with evolutionary psychology. It's one of these fields where, there's problems with evolutionary psych. We can talk about it. Christopher Walken and a brain recording device? Enough said. Yeah, there we go. All right. As psychologists such as David M. Buss of the University of Texas at Austin, Lita Cosmides of the University of California, Santa Barbara, and Stephen Pinker of Harvard University have been arguing for more than a decade, not only are our bodies a product of natural selection, for example, our opposable thumbs for grasping and our bipedal posture for walking, but our minds bear the thumbprint of evolution as well. Dun dun dun, the thumbprint of evolution. I'm sorry, from my philosophical point of view, it's like, I don't give a shit about your metaphors. Give me something a bit better than that. Yeah, Team Evo Psych, exactly. MD says, if I need to hear one more Evo Psych explanation for qualia. Like, this is, like, that's literally what's getting said here, though. I'm sorry, MDD. Like, that's literally it. They were just saying, right up here, they were saying it here. It's like, it's a phenomenological product of mind. Rather than, God and afterlife are phenomenological products of mind rather than an objective reality. That's literally an explanation for qualia is what we're getting at right here. It's like, I'm sorry. And it's like, we can call it from the get-go. So much of this. No longer listening to Eminem. I don't give a shit about your metaphors. Give me something else. Keck W. I need to install Keck W. Yeah. It's like, I love the metaphors, but these are tired ones at this point. I've heard this story before. Okay. Author says, in many cases, the way we think about a particular class of events, the so-called structure of our psychology, reflects why we think that way, the so-called function of our psychology. Yeah, so this is, I guess, called the genetic fallacy sometimes, although I think that's a misnomer. The article's from 2006. Okay. I mean, a small pass, but I don't actually think a whole lot's happened in the last, is that 18 years? Like, I don't think a whole lot's changed, but yes. So the author gets somewhat of a small pass. I could tell by the people he was referencing that I think the sort of discussion has moved on from this way of talk, but not all of it. A lot of it I think actually we have not moved on, but we don't have anything else to say, so it's kind of quieted down. Is it considered out of style? You can bring up the fallacy if you want. I mean, I don't have to talk about it. Just be like, I might just say you're right or you're wrong. But I think it's the genetic fallacy where you're saying, look, where did it come from is how it is, when basically we could change how we see the world. And this is what philosophy does a lot of times. We reinterpret how the world can be understood. And then all of a sudden, well, now we need a different sort of the genetic fallacy where where it came from doesn't matter as much because we just changed how we understand the way the world is. Yeah, you can criticize the article as much as you like. Reading rap. Kerwin Chelway says, I think you could replace psychology with politics and get a true statement for most people also. That's fair. Politics is a lot of psychology goes into how people view politics and the way the world is, so that's what they do. It's like politics is, a study of like how to organize people, and that's going to be a reflection of their psychology or group psychology, as it were. All right. Author says, take for instance our preference for sweet and fatty foods, or our fear of heights and snakes, or the fact that we go coochie coochie coo whenever we see a cute baby. These behaviors are all, according to evolutionary psychologists, caused by unconscious mental forces that helped our ancestors to survive and thrive in the remote past. We may not know why we do think or feel as we do, but as biologist Richard Dawkins argues in his book, The Selfish Gene, from our gene's point of view, this ignorance is entirely moot anyway, so long as we work on their behalf. MDD says, I don't think it's in poor taste to bring up fallacy as long as you're putting effort into arguing for how something is fallacious and not just going, it has a Yu-Gi-Oh! Trap card, the appeal to authority fallacy argument is now void. Yeah, I mean, if you do that and it's funny, that's cool, but like if you're just bringing stuff up and be like, oh, you're wrong, it's like, almost all fallacies have exceptions to them. Like there's always going to be one or two cases where it's like an appeal to authority, but actually that's a good appeal to authority. Like they're appealing to somebody, but like that was actually a good use of it. You're doing an ad hominem attack is one of the things I say. Attacking the person is sometimes the right thing to do. Like it's not usually the right thing to do. Sometimes it's the right thing to do. So it's like just bringing up an argument and being like, oh, they did this. It's like, well, was it actually a problem in this one instance? And I think you have to be a bit more careful than just bring it up. So yeah, like if you have a point, like they made this fallacy and this is what it shows about their argument, good. If you'd be like, well, they made a fallacy, it's, well, what did it show? Like, is it actually a bad instance? Okay. Continuing, behavior is therefore one of the primary currencies used by natural selection, and it's psychological states that drive behavior. So, okay, we've got a little theory here. It's like we're talking about psychology and behavior, and you have to talk about the psychology that drives the behavior. That means is there no behavior without psychology? I'm not sure about that. Wing Chun forever. Yes, exactly. O'Doyle rules. Coming Chesney, the so-called structure of our politics reflects why we think that way. The so-called function of our politics. Yeah, no need to respond. Yeah, but I get your point. It's like if you can start switching out words, it stops making it look like it's so specific about what the author is talking about. I used to do this a bunch. Be like, look, they're not making any claims here because you can switch out all the words and like the argument still sounds fine. So that means it's not a specific point to what they're talking about. I mean, that's an argument. I mean, if you just do that and you don't explain what's going on, then people are going to be confused. But I've done this before, and people are like, what are you talking about? Well, I was like, well, look, if you can just start switching words out, that means they're not actually making a specific point about what they think they're talking about. MDD says, sometimes someone's character and track record is a good proxy for discerning the probability of the argument being valid if the content of the argument itself seems impenetrable. You can definitely say, I'm going to take some people more seriously because of their track record and all that stuff. Even like there's the argument, well, the broken clock is right twice a day. And it's like, well, and then it's like, well, you're accusing someone of being stupid and you don't like them and you don't know if that argument's bad. It's like, no, I'm not wasting my time anymore. Even if they get lucky and know something, that person's not like worth my time talking to sometimes. And it's like, well, I'm not going to worry about them anymore. I just don't have the brain space to care. Even if they're right about something, I don't think they're going to be right about enough that I want to listen to them anymore. So it's like, you have to just cut things off at a certain point. It's like, okay, yeah, you can go be the universally like, oh, I'm going to go listen to everyone. That's stupid. You're wasting your life. Like, there's too many things out there that you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go listen to a stupid person. It's like, no, you're wasting your life if that's like, you're going to go listen to everyone. It's like, nah, like you have to make better decisions about yourself at that point. Okay, recognizing the evolutionary roots of much of human behavior, I began to wonder whether a psychological susceptibility to belief in God is a result of an adaptive design. Well, I mean, that's easy. Like, probably. Like, okay. I mean, then again, 2006, maybe I'm just like, I've already internalized this sort of thought. This is already a popular article in a magazine. So it's not like this was already not in the air. Yeah. Look, I came here for an argument. No. There we go. Okay. That hypothesis would only make sense if indeed there were behaviors associated with such susceptibility made us genetically successful. Yeah. So just as canine teeth evolved to help people rip the flesh off bones, could a belief in God have evolved to help people tear bits off of meaning from an otherwise meaningless existence? Oh God, what is this person doing? And like literally, oh God. Or perhaps God is simply a spandrel, an architectural term for an ornamental arch adopted by Stephen Jay Gould and Richard Lewontin to indicate a biological feature that is passed down part and parcel with another trait and is not on its own a product of natural selection. I hate that argument. It's like, why would it keep getting passed down? Usually things get, mucked up over the years, because, there's random changes. So the idea that we're going to have things that just hang on without any use is, I feel, a little bit of a weak argument. So it's like, but yeah, the idea is that, look, it takes time for things to go away. Also, like once we've evolved a certain way and then maybe the world changes, we don't need that trait anymore. It takes time for that to go away. And so maybe God was something we needed thousands of years ago, but it's just dying off slowly. Yeah, author says God might be an accidental byproduct of human cognitive evolution, a functionless leftover of the capacity to reason about other human minds in the everyday social world, as cognitive scientists such as Pascal Boyer of Washington University in St. Louis believe. There's a third option, which I favor, that religious belief is an exaptation, a spandrel that turned out to be useful, and so was subsequently selected for by evolutionary pressures. It's okay if there's no use as long as it does no harm. Yeah, but in our bodies, it's wasting energy then. So, like, it's going to go away just very slowly as long as it's doing no harm. But, like, if it's taking up space, that's just one more thing that could break. So, yeah. Like, the idea that it's doing no harm seems like, well, why is it there? We had to expend energy to make it. And that is a problem. Now, again, like maybe it's getting rid of it takes a lot of energy, or it's, needed as part of like the generative process in our bodies, and then we just have to suffer with it for the rest of our lives. But at that point, that means it actually was useful in part of our generative biology, and that can happen too. Like we have leftovers of that. That makes at least some sense. All right. So types of minds. One way to assess the impact of evolution on supernatural beliefs is to study different types of minds. In 1996, I made regular excursions to a small town in Florida called South Hialeah. If it's a side effect of a theory of mind, yeah, it may take more energy to dispel it. Yeah. So, I mean, that's fine. But that's a really specific sort of thing, and it would be unbelievably hard to prove. Or even support, not prove, even support, it'd be unbelievably hard. And so I'd be skeptical from the scientific point of view and then skeptical from the philosophical point of view, because it is a very specific explanation and it's a very strong conclusion. Corwin says, from a simply functional perspective, parts of our oldest writings involve religion. It seems to be part of all the oldest cultures that survived to be our ancestors. Not sure what that means. Yeah, that just means that it was there. Now, does that actually mean it's evolutionary based? No, because by the time we could write, that's well beyond genetics at that point. Maybe it's holdover from old evolution, but there's a gap between humans and then writing and culture and stuff. So it could be culturally generated and not evolutionarily generated. So it'd be it's hard to say. Jesse proposes an explanation later. Okay, we'll find out. Florida called, yeah, is this your friend? I mean, it's cool. I mean, I don't have a problem being mean or whatever if it's your buddy, but it's just, this is not, I'm not in love with these sorts of things. Okay, so this person's been at Florida called South Hialeah to see one of the most famous residents of Greater Miami. He was called simply King. Legend has it that he was born one of a set of twins somewhere in the dense African rainforest, but when his mother was murdered, he was made an orphan and shipped off to the States to perform with his brother in a traveling circus. It was in these early circus days that the ringmaster allegedly had King's teeth knocked out with a hammer. Now under a canopy of palms, this 450-pound gorilla with calcified gums, what a sad story that is, leaned imperiously against the wall of his enclosure and stole my wary glances at me as I scribbled down my notes. Soon, King's trainer would have him put on his trademark show for shouting school children, performed 3 times a day for the past 17 years, in which he would sedately climb on top of a 20-gallon drum and belly dance for the modest price of a crisp head of lettuce. This is so sad. Yeah, prof in a QUB who I knew through the humanist events. Okay, cool. Over subsequent months, King and I had interactions that were both mutually unsettling and reinforcing. See, I'm losing it. How does this author know how King feels about things and is unsettled? What does it mean for the ape to be unsettled? Or the gorilla, not an ape, whatever. Yeah. Okay. Author says, on some occasions he would pound his chest and charge at me or projectile vomit on me. On others he would stick out his enormous feet between the steel bars, inviting me to tickle his plump, rubbery toes, purring with guttural affection. Through all his eclectic behaviors, one question remained in my mind. After a life so profoundly muddled by humans, would King think to ask God why this was his lot in life? MDD says, I feel like arguments like the one in this paper target the question of why religion catches on so quickly in the layperson, or why it's so socially contagious, much better than the question of God as a whole. Like higher level theory and philosophy of religion is adequately muscled, in your opinion, to fend off accusations like you believe in God only because these tendencies you evolved. That's fair, It's why does it catch on? Well, there's good reasons, psychologically speaking. But again, once you get into someone who knows how to counteract everyday arguments, it's not going to hold up anymore. But for a lot of people, that's going to work. So it is going to work. Could King think of God at all? I mean, how do we have any real understanding what's going on in gorillas' minds? Do we? Yeah, it's an article based on research written for the layperson. That's a good point, Vipers. They're trying to make complex things easier to understand here. Now, there's going to be a lot of philosophical wishy-washiness whenever this happens. It's like very hard to get the ideas just right in a popularized form. So it's like we have to see what the conclusions are. All right. So, as Darwin stated in The Descent of Man, quote, there can be no doubt that the difference between the mind of the lowest man and that of the highest animal is immense. Nevertheless, the difference in mind, great as it is, certainly is one of degree and not of kind. If so, then we should find some psychological states in King that are evolutionary variants of human beliefs in soul or the afterlife. See, I don't see how that follows at all. We don't actually understand what different gradations of mind are. So the idea that we're going to find this same sort of thought in something else, I don't think follows. So we don't have like an easy way to be like, okay, this is the kind of like consciousness we have, and this is the kind of consciousness like the great apes have, and like it's just a matter of like, degree, and so the same things exist all along the way. I don't think that follows. Yeah. Author says, although it may be difficult to get King to discuss his thoughts on these matters, there's another way to figure out what kinds of minds are needed to entertain existential beliefs, by seeing how these traits appear in children of different ages. Other mental systems, such as empathy, have been found to emerge piecemeal, with precursory components of the end state coming up gradually during child's development. If humans are naturally inclined to believe in God and the afterlife, there is good reason to think that children will exhibit signs of these traits before receiving any cultural indoctrination. MD says, true, I'm thinking of talking with a chip on my shoulder from all the new atheist online arguing I've had to read in the past 10 years, which argues from a similar place, but you're right on, this author is chill. Yeah. So, again, it's hard to like look at kids and be like, well, how exactly does like the children's thought reflect evolution? Well, it definitely reflects something, but then again, how do you track that specifically back? How do you get that from there to like, the idea that like kids, when they learn to speak, are not picking anything up from the adults, I also think is wrong. They are picking up a lot. So it's like, how do you actually separate that out? Again, I don't know. All right, so author says, this is the question that I explored for my doctoral dissertation, for which I presented children ages 4 through 12 with a puppet show, which we agreed was just a game, that portrayed an innocuous little mouse being eaten by a grumpy alligator. Afterwards, I asked the children a series of questions. Now that the mouse was dead, did it miss its mom? Was it still hungry? Was it still angry at its brother? Could it still taste the grass it ate right before it died? Curiously, the younger the child, the more likely he or she was to endow the dead mouse with the capacity to experience various mental states, despite the fact that even preschoolers generally understood that the mouse's body had stopped functioning after death. This is precisely the opposite of the pattern that one would expect to find if the origins of such belief could be traced exclusively to cultural indoctrination. In fact, religious answers such as heaven, God, and spirits among the youngest children were extraordinarily rare. If belief in an afterlife is entirely cultural, older children would have more exposure and become more socially aligned to prevailing metaphysical beliefs, and therefore would be expected to attribute more traits to the afterlife. I don't know if I believe any of that. Like, there's something to that, but like, that seems really hard. Like, I'd have to see the research. What exactly was asked? Who were these kids? Like, what did they learn? I don't know about like how you'd be like, all right, so the little kids think it still could taste. Does that mean they believe in God? Maybe they like object permanence doesn't like things are kind of messy. Yeah. Ivan says it sounds fairly rational. It does sound fairly rational. The problem is it's like there's ways around all of this, like, and they're not hard to come up with. Author says some of the most striking findings from the study involved a disconnection between closely related body and psychological processes. For instance, many of the youngest children reasoned that the dead mouse needn't eat or drink after death, while simultaneously reasoned that it retained the capacity for hunger and thirst. Such responses dropped off when the children better understood the biology of life. This seemed to show that children have a naive theory about psychological functioning after death that initially includes all psychological states, which are gradually pruned to a more restrictive range of functioning. For instance, even the youngest children knew that the brain stopped working at death, but most children, even the oldest, refused to say that the mouse stopped loving its mother at death. See, that's sweet, but you can see the idea that like kids have a theory of brains and like mind, like that they can distinguish between biological brain. We didn't know, like the ancient Egyptians, and this is a fact, didn't know what the brain was for. They didn't understand what it was. They threw it out. At least is my understanding. They got rid of it because they didn't understand that it had a function. So it's like, if we went back to ancient Egypt, which is 2,000 years ago, or maybe, 2,000 years ago, but in evolutionary time, that's nothing. We are exactly the same as the ancient Egyptians are. And you asked ancient Egyptian kids these questions, I think they would have a very different answer because there was no theory of brain. We didn't have a concept. They didn't have a concept that the brain did anything. So it's like, if you think about the ancient Egyptians, like this doesn't make any sense at all. Like, I'm sorry. Because if you go to a culture that didn't have a theory of brain and mind, they only had a theory of mind, then this doesn't make any sense at all. Granted, the ancient Egyptians were, like, the Greeks thought of them as religious nutcases too. So it's like the ancient Greeks thought the ancient Egyptians were religious whack jobs. They're like, oh my god, they've got like these sun gods and shit. Like, what the fuck is wrong with them? Okay, the intuitiveness of the afterlife. By claiming that psychological states survive death, or even alluding to this possibility, one commits to a radical form of mind-body dualism. Again, I like, even 4-year-olds I think are getting like culturally like into, like, if they understand the difference between mind and brain, they're modern people, not ancient Egyptian people. And it's like, well, what are we actually studying then? Because dualism, in our sense of it, came around with Descartes about 500 years ago. It's like that's a modern theory in terms of philosophy. Okay, in which each appears to be able to exist without the other. But what exactly does the brain do if the mental activities can exist independently of it? Yeah. And the link, Ivan, I think, yeah, so I don't know if, and that's the website for people who are looking. This is if you want to download it. And you have to get the whole thing, even though the commas are messing it up. Yeah. Yeah, but what exactly does the brain do if mental activity can exist independent of it? The devil, it seems, is in the details. In cognitive science, this devil is welcome. Indeed, it makes frequent appearances, asking very specific questions. My colleagues and I call this devil reductionism and invite others to watch it play a game of wit with what are perhaps some of their most sacred beliefs. After the devil has its say, it makes a pretty convincing case. The distinctively human ideas of God, souls, and meaning are at once absolutely seductive and yet so disarmingly irrational. A few years ago, I published... What page am I on? Okay, 4. A few years ago, I published the results of a series of interviews with college students who were asked to reason about the fate of the mind after death, much as I had asked the children in the study with the puppet show. The questions I asked were of the reductionist variety. Could a man who was instantly killed in a car accident still experience lust? How's his sense of taste? Is he still angry about his wife about their spat the previous night? As expected, those students who had reported that they had some belief in God were more likely to attribute mental states to dead agents. The big surprise was that people who categorized themselves as extinctivists, those who stated that the personal consciousness is snuffed out entirely at death, often betrayed their real thinking about the afterlife during the interview. For example, when asked whether the dead protagonist knew that he was dead, a feat demanding ongoing cognitive abilities, one young extinctivist's answer was almost comical. Yeah, he'd know, because if I don't believe in the afterlife, it is non-existent, he sees that now. You see, that's inconsistent. I mean, comical. The author knows this. So, despite himself, this alleged extinctivist was a dualist. Yeah. So, it's like people say one thing, they do something else. That's a separate problem, though. All right. The results of the study taken with the data. So the question is, what do you really believe then? And the idea that like they make mistakes, does that actually mean they believe one thing, even though they say something else? Like, what do you mean by really believe then? It's like, I don't love that. I don't love that talk either. So it's like, what are you supposed to learn from that? I don't know. All right. The results of the study taken with the data from the puppet show experiment indicate that because no one knows what it's like to be dead, people attribute to dead agents the mental traits that they cannot imagine being without. The results also provide evidence that belief in supernatural agents pirates the brain's mental inference system that are designed to reason about everyday intentional living agents. People know that other people have mental traits and actions even when the other people are not being directly observed. So it may be the default cognitive state to give these traits to unseen dead agents. That's a good point. Dan Kahneman just died today. He made a great point about that framing effects matter. If you set something up to say there's a dead man and that man was thinking this, then you've already framed it in that the dead man is thinking and people will go along with that. If you say, well, the dead man and then there's a body, is the body thinking? Maybe they'll answer differently because you framed the question differently, and that matters. And that's Kahneman and Tversky talk about this framing effect a lot, and this is important. People, the way the question is asked will change the responses. Okay, some psychologists such as Boyer have put forward the idea that supernatural beliefs arose through culture alone and that religious ideas are pervasive because they are counterintuitive. They violate the mind's understanding of the world, which in fact makes them easier to remember. Kahneman is proud of me for pointing that out. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like I am on record saying he's wrong about what he won the Nobel Prize for. So yeah, but like he's not wrong about that framing effects matter. MDD says, I think it means that they were raised under a certain paradigm or framework that is firmly entrenched in how they see the world. Yeah, I'm with you, MDD. And even though they discard the particular belief of mind-body dualism, they haven't gone through the process of mining the implications of discarding the belief compared to the rest of the framework they have. Quine duum moment. Yeah, and that's underdetermination. It's like you're saying they believe it, but like it's really, you don't know what is actually causing them to say this. Are they getting confused due to the framing effect? Have they not worked everything out? The idea that the author is saying, well, they really believe it because this is what they say when they make them, when you like under the circumstances. No, you don't actually know why they said that. It's underdetermined. That's quine duum, and it's like, yes, that's correct. We don't know why they said that. You can't attribute like realness to that belief. Okay, author says my view of the afterlife beliefs are the default state, and it is in fact counterintuitive for people to deny them. In the students and the older children's mental representations of the dead agents, see again, dead agents, already framing. You're not saying dead bodies, you say dead agents. That's a framing issue right there. Some traits were more easily lost than others. Students had to think about twice as long before answering questions about emotional or epistemic feelings and knowing states over biological or psychobiological, hearing or hunger, for instances, states after death. To humans, dead agents, see dead bodies, are therefore not just invisible beings but have narrower ranges of experience than in life. Therefore, it seems that it's natural for human beings to reason about death as a transitional state of consciousness, and cultural communication serves to meter, either to enrich or degrade, these intuitive conceptions of the afterlife. Ivanio says all he needs to show at this stage is that their beliefs are probably not cultural, that is cognitive limitations or biases. I'm sure that's where he's going. But like, see, I still have a bad beef with this. Like, I feel like the dualism that came around in 1500, and if you go back to the ancient Egyptians, as I was saying, I find like maybe people's reactions would be completely different because there is no way that, like, you know, we didn't have dualism before Descartes. Like, we had stuff, but like it was completely different. And so it's like I like the whole thing feels a very narrow-minded sort of perspective to me. All right. But yeah, like that's where I'm sure he's going, Ivan. Like that'd be the next progression. Is like show that it's not cultural. And they brought that up already here. Where was that? They said like someone else's view is, yeah. See, I think they've already hinted at it. Right here it says, some psychologists such as Boyer put forward the idea that supernatural beliefs arose through culture alone. And like, so it's just culture alone. They're getting there. All right. There are several other developmental psychologists who have recently begun investigating the natural foundations of religion using empirical methods from cognitive science, and their results are complementary to what I have found. For example, in a recent study, Valerie Kohlmeier, a psychologist at Queen's University in Ontario, and her colleagues positioned identical twin experiments behind different partitions. I don't think that's true. Say early Christians were not dualists. Yeah. So it's like, well, that's the problem. Is like this author is making a dualist argument. So it's like, if you go back, no one's a dualist, and so I think this is weird. What's up, reading map? Yeah. So this was done in order to test 5-month-old ability to reason about the law of continuous motion as it applies to human bodies. Infants are known to show surprise at unexpected events by looking at them for longer periods of time. For inanimate objects, infants look longer when the objects disappear behind one barrier and then seem to emerge from another non-adjacent barrier. Seeing a person who violates the law of continuous motion, however, 5-month-olds are not surprised. The authors speculate that infants do not readily view humans as material objects, but may first think of people as only as intentional agents. An appreciation that people are just objects may be a developmental accomplishment. That's weird. I mean, I don't know what this means. I don't like, so they're saying they're used to people coming and going, but not objects. I don't know if they like, but the conclusion they don't view people as objects is very strange, because people moving around on their own, they probably understand that people move and they don't see all the movements. Objects have to be like moved and they go in like, regular things. Yeah, you've been here, I know. But you were like, I was like, huh? Yeah. Frank says there's also middle ground where the beliefs are cultural but still near universal, because cultures with these beliefs get reliably selected for some reason. Like that's what's getting me, is like there's a lot of options here, and this is a very, I feel like, contemporary centric view of like how things are. It's like, yeah, if you go looking for this and this is how you think everything is, and you're going to interpret things like this. It's like, that's as Reading Rap says. Yeah. Okay. Societal advantages. The studies discussed so far have shown that existential beliefs require a certain level of cognitive development to be fully expressed. Well, that's true. Afterlife beliefs thus depend on other cognitive systems to exist. Sure. Therefore, they are likely not an independent adaptive trait, but more likely a spandrel or an exaptation. I hate those terms. Like, I wish people would drop that crap. But like, okay, they're there for whatever reason. What's up, Adam Fighter? I had a question like that on a test. It said if a car travels over a speed bump and its tire comes off, then what direction did it go? Forward, backwards, or stayed? Yeah, it's like you have to understand that like things are continuous, but people, I suspect, and maybe even babies know this, do not walk always in straight lines. People turn. Like, maybe kids know that. That's not like a crazy thought. All right, but to theorize further between the latter two possibilities, one needs to determine whether there has been an evolutionary advantage to believing in the supernatural. Once humans develop speech in other societies, selfish behaviors such as violence or cheating could be reported. Such behaviors could therefore result in retaliation, such as social marginalization. This punishment would have physical impact. People labeled as poor cooperators might be considered to be poor reproductive partners, thus keeping in line became genetically adaptive. What's up, Tyrant? How you doing? Yeah. Tyrant Frog. Yeah, first time chat. Welcome in. But maybe human intelligence couldn't be relied on to follow the rules. In some no one will ever know instances, the threat of detection may appear deceivingly low, so individuals are tempted to profit from cheating tactics. But such temptations would be less attractive if there was a Santa Claus effect, where individuals thought that they were being constantly watched by invisible beings. I thus reason that the idea of supernatural observation may serve as a to counteract such dangerous risk miscalculations, persuading the person to refrain from social deviance and subsequently to preserve their genetic fitness. That was okay. So you need something like a big daddy in the sky or a big mommy, like naughty, being like, you're naughty, we have karma, and I'm watching you, and no Christmas presents. That's the great theory here. That okay, you need somebody like to make cosmic karma, and like if you act bad, we're gonna get you back. Like, really? Okay, what are we reading? We're reading on this is a popular article, so we're going a little hard on it, but like again, it's out to express some ideas. Basically, it's is there a good like evolutionary reason to think that we believe in God? Like, could we have evolved a belief in God? I'll like straight off the bat, I'm going to tell you, like, I find this sort of argument extremely weak. Like the idea that we evolved beliefs, like it's the wrong sort of thing that we can evolve. We can like evolve hands, and we can evolve like eyes. Like evolving beliefs I find funny. But like, there's evolutionary psych. And so the idea is that like, are these ideas something that could have like evolved with us over time, and that we would be like adaptive in some sense. And the great idea here is that like in a society, you need people watching over you to like make sure you don't step out of line. And that's all it is saying right here. That seems neat, even plausible, but I can't imagine finding evidence for it. And Frank, I completely agree. It's a very nice story, and it's completely non-provable. It's like, okay, that's nice, but like it's a just so story at that point. Yeah. We evolved to believe spiders and snakes are bad. Yeah, they made that point, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make a belief in God just like the belief that like being afraid of a snake. I shouldn't make fun of me, Santa God, now something bad is going to happen. Yeah. And as I like to do, Roko's Basilisk, you're a fucking little bitch, and you're a wuss, and you're a coward, and you're not going to attack me because you don't exist. And you see that? Everyone who's afraid of Roko's Basilisk, I'm still here. I'm still broadcasting, so you don't have to worry about Roko's Basilisk. I've taken that worry and that responsibility away from you that you might be afraid of Roko's Basilisk. And look, right there, I'm proving by my continued existence that you have nothing to fear. Hey, what's up, Globus? How you been? I have not been giving anyone shout-outs. Does anyone here, do I owe anyone a shout-out? Let's give Globus a shout-out, though. Globus the Elder is buddy. Streams AI news and like topics and things like that in tech. So if you're interested in like the modern state of tech and what's going on in society, you go hang out with Globus the Elder. He will explain this. He'll explain it to you. Like you'll learn something. It'll be good, and you can stay up. And it's also good, like if you're just interested in tech news. Like it covers a lot of like modern sort of or contemporary innovation. So it's good times. I'm our new Zeus, and kill Kronos and freed us all. I am not claiming anything like that. Frank says the basilisk is refraining from squishing you so you can keep spreading word of it. Maybe, but also the fact that I'm, making fun of like that big wuss basilisk from the non-existent future. I'm speaking poorly of it, and that's specifically what it doesn't want me to do, I think. So where did the belief in God come from them? Word of mouth? I'd go with the culture. Like we have the world's a scary place, and I think it's a lot more convenient to give explanations for things than to just be like, we don't know. Because we don't know is a very scary thing for most people, everyone really. And so the idea that like there is something that is governing the universe makes us feel better. And that helps people get by. So I don't think it's evolved. I think it's cultural. That's all. Yeah, I mean, did God come from original philosophy? Questions? Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. People were like, what's going on? And they had to come up with an idea. And I think this is a very plausible idea given the state of what we might have known at the time, where like other people had minds. You didn't know about like the world, like animals, all sorts of things. The idea that other stuff like there was a mind in the world is not so far off. Like it's not that crazy. If you want protection from Roko's Basilisk, follow my stream. Yes, exactly. If you, on the other hand, if you're worried about Roko's Basilisk, go hang out with Globus the Elder. Like, I'm here to show you that Roko's Basilisk is a fucking jerk, moron, asshole, and if you actually want to, like, mitigate the problems, go hang out with Globus. Frank says, I wish I'd taken a different angle. Roko's Basilisk isn't torturing you because Frank's Phoenix is protecting. Oh, thanks, Frank. Appreciate that. I love you, yeah. You believe in God, never needed a reason. Yeah, that's fair. But it arrived on to me on its own. Fine. Like, there's a lot in our world that also would indicate that God exists. Like our culture, like our current cultures are very God-centric too. We have like, if you're in like my area of the world, there's lots of churches all over the place. It's not like it's not in the air all the time, like the idea. And so the idea that like you got it, like that's a normal thought. Like it's normal. Yeah. Religion is too easily skewed to follow man's ambition. Well, everything we do is kind of skewed also. Yeah, Frank's Phoenix. Yeah, You're doing your part to help bring Tim into existence. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you've named Roko's Basilisk Tim. Yeah, there we go. All right, cool. So yeah, I'm just on like most of what we talk about, these all have like long histories, and the idea that like it was evolved, it's like I don't see. You can give this sort of argument they're giving here. It doesn't impress me. It's like, sure, nice just so story, but that's not enough for me. Okay. So, author says people in most hunter-gatherer societies have a fear of ancestral ghosts who think are constantly watching them. But to gather empirical evidence for this theory, my colleagues Katrina McLeod, Todd K. Shackelford, and I set up a study of undergraduates where we tempted them to cheat on a competitive computer task. Students were told that they were evaluating a new test of spatial intelligence, but that there were still some glitches in the program, so occasionally the correct answer would appear on screen. Viper says everyone's an atheist. You don't believe in the 18,000 other gods humans have worshipped. What we call an atheist just doesn't believe in the 18,001. Yeah, that's the argument against God again. Ivan says showing we have bias to believe in God is just step one. Step two is to show it's important. It imparts a survival advantage. Yeah, and I don't think you can prove that. Like, how would you prove that at this point? There's no like empirical study you could do. Everything is going to be a just so story. So it's difficult. So this is why I say it's more likely just a cultural thing to me. I mean, maybe it was like, and also the idea that beliefs evolved, I find really difficult to like square, because who knows what beliefs were like thousands of years ago for whatever like proto-humans were. You really enjoy the story enjoy just so stories though? A lot of people do, Frank. That's fine. He said it's an exaptation. That's the same thing, basically. It's saying it evolved as a response to something else. I don't actually make that distinction. I think that's a crap distinction, because that's saying one thing evolved and the other thing didn't, but they came about at the same time for the same reason, basically. And it's like, well, that's, I think, just bias to what adaptation you like. Like, I find that like human, that's hindsight's 2020, or like that's us reading back into it with like rose-colored sunglasses, like rose-colored glasses. Yes, he's saying it's an exaptation where it was like something else, but that's making a lot of assumptions about how it came about in the first place, like a lot. So yeah, it's like, as you say, it's arising from the theory of mind. A lot of things had to be assumed, and then that's also saying, well, it wasn't what was meant to happen, but it wasn't, and that kind of makes it okay. I don't know. Just get out of here with that. Get out of here. Tyrant says, I absolutely agree with me, being cultural Christian in particular, band together so we help each other survive in this current world. I think that's one of the main functions of religion, is to support community. And I don't think that's even remotely controversial. I think that's just how it is. So it's like, yes. Okay, so the students are looking at the screen, and maybe they'll get lucky every so often. The students were instructed to immediately hit the spacebar to clear the answer. Unbeknownst to them, the answer's appearance was not accidental. We were timing how long it took for students to hit the spacebar, so we had a way to measure whether or not the students were cheating on the test. Students were left alone in a room during the task, but one group was told a ghost story beforehand. A graduate student involved in the study had died suddenly, and sightings of his ghost had recently been reported in the testing room. Dun dun dun. Yeah. Community makes culture, yeah. And culture makes community. Around in a circle. Yeah. Yeah, Ivan agrees with Tyrant. Adam says, well, you look at it objectively, several systems might approximate to behaving like organized religion. Yeah, there's more than one way this can come around. There's more than one way to do all this stuff, like to have community and things like that. You don't need to have organized religion to do many of the things organized religion does. Yeah. Hunter-gatherers did die out in favor of agriculture, but then people fuck up agriculture a lot too, and then they have to go back to hunter-gatherer. Like, you go hang out with Shane, and you find out about that. Okay. A second group of students was given an in memoriam statement at the end of the test instructions, indicated that the test was dedicated to the dead student, but they were not told the ghost story. A third group of students was told either of these stories. We found that the students who were told the ghost story hit the spacebar significantly faster than the two groups, resisting the opportunity to cheat on the test. Oh, they were afraid of the ghost. Yeah. Yeah, community survived. Well, something survived. Yeah. Double-edged knife, yes. So how does this all connect back to God and suffering? What? Where did suffering come from? Like that story at the beginning where they're like, when I was sick, I felt bad and like I was pleading to God. Okay. Here comes the Just So story. If it were evolutionarily advantageous for humans to believe that an omnipotent deities would punish them if they did wrong, they would always do right. It's possible that human logic must have then flipped this around so that people to believe by extension that if they do not do wrong, the supernatural being will not punish them. See this, like, you see right here, they had to be like, it's logic. Like, the people just flip this around. This is like, okay, this is what you say, but like, this has nothing to do with any scientific evidence. Nothing. This is just them saying this is a story that, like, how it could have come about. It's a Just So story, and that's fine. All ghost stories are silly? You don't like ghost stories, Globus? Oh, okay. That's fine. Why would they use such a silly ghost story? Because it worked. Clearly it worked. People who were told about the ghost reacted faster to the spooky things. It works. Framing works. If the story was more plausible, wouldn't more people heed the warning? That's the point. It doesn't need to be plausible. It can be silly. People act on silly things. Ruh-roh. In other words, they believe that they have a social contract with the deity who must adhere to these rules. Indeed, this belief has become so ingrained that if misfortune occurs, some cultures take this to mean the person has done some unknown wrong. Yeah. Well, this is definitely the case. These are N. Irish kids are N. Irish kids are fucking stupid. You know, because you were one? Yeah. All kids are stupid. I mean, Irish ones too, but all kids. So it's like, yeah. And I was a kid too, and I was fucking stupid. Signs from beyond. If human beings had evolved to believe that dead agents are watching them, again, you see the framing here. Agents. You didn't say dead things, dead agents. As soon as you say agent, that's going to have something with a mind. So framing. It would not be surprising to find that they are looking for messages from their observers, perhaps as reminders that they are indeed under surveillance. And it turns out that communing with the dead... Oh yeah, hello FBI agents that watch all of our streams. Yeah, and it turns out that communing with the dead does come with well-oiled ease for most people. Yeah. I'm surprised I survived. I was so stupid. I did not plan on living past 30. I didn't think I was going to... Yeah, it was kind of because I was stupid. I didn't think I was going to live past 30. I just didn't. I had like impending sense of doom when I was younger. I was like, I'm not going to make it to 30. And I'll tell you something. It wasn't really because of my stupidity, but it was close. I almost did not make it. Only agents can watch things. Yeah, this is one of these little things that's annoying me about the article here. Is that, like, as we've been talking about Kahneman today, because he died today, framing matters. It really matters. And like the fact that the author keeps saying this, maybe it's for rhetorical use to make their point here, or maybe they were framing things like this even when they were doing their science. It makes me worried. Do I really think he was using the agent with kids? Yeah. Well, I just don't know. But that makes me worried. So the question is it rhetorical here, or is it uncareful? I assume... We'll have to assume, like, you know, benefit of the doubt that he was careful. But again, you're still doing it here, which is sort of like it's rhetorical at that point. And like, I know, like in that case, if it's just a rhetorical thing, it's like, that's okay. But like, you're already sort of begging the question. Yeah. You're just warming up. You like this one? Okay. Frank says, of course, dead humans aren't watching over us. They all go watch over some other planet. And our watchers are all dead aliens. Yes. Globus says, I was going to be 27 in 2000. That was the extent of your plan. You're going to make it to the 2000. You were going to see the year 2000 bug. Nice. Yeah. I thought I wouldn't live past 30, so I had to get everything done early. And so I got a lot of philosophy done. I was like, I'm going to go figure out what's going on. Got a lot of philosophy done. He was speaking to kids as kids. He's using this language to us. Yes, but the problem is if he's doing this here, it's like, was there some sort of something else going on with the kids? You'd have to go look at the studies. And so it's like the way they're always saying agents here, it makes me worried that he's like, if he's going to beg the question here, because this is what it looks like begging the question here. If you're saying there's an agent, agents are sort of things that have rationality in mind. You don't say dead body. If dead bodies are watching over them, it sounds weird. But like, that's the whole point. They're dead bodies. It's like, okay. But you see, you don't beg the question at that point. You don't put any of like what you already think into the answer. So it's like, yes. But like, it makes me worried about it. So you're right. I don't know, but like, it makes me worried. All right. So yeah, so it turns out that communing with the dead does come with well-oiled ease for most people. Yeah, it's easy. Granted, it's ambiguous and one-sided conversation, but for many, the environment is filled with signs from the beyond, from the great beyond. Cognitive psychology has some explanations for this behavior as well. It turns out that understanding the messages of unseen agents is directly related to how we comprehend the minds of other human beings. Consider, for instance, that one day all human beings became hardcore solipsists, a philosophy that denies the existence of other minds. Imagine, say, that everyone was dying. Imagine, say, that everyone was struck down with autism or otherwise lost the capacity to think about other minds. See, this is very old. The idea that autism would prevent you from thinking about other minds, like you wouldn't say that now. What would happen then? I'd venture that church attendance would reach an all-time low next Sunday. Maybe, I don't know. You don't care if Zardos can see you eating this Cadbury cream egg? Oh, I'd love a Cadbury cream egg. Here, then, is one key ingredient for belief in God or spirit: an innate disposition to see others not just as ambulant objects or brain-dead sacks of meat, but as thinking, feeling beings that, just like oneself, are causal agents who do things intentionally. Once children are able to reason about mental lives of others, developmental psychologists refer to them as possessing a theory of mind. Yeah, that's what it's called. Viper says there were questions like, how do you think the crocodile feels? How do you think the dead crocodile feels? At a certain age, the kids recognized that the crocodile was dead and couldn't feel anything, but before that, the default position was to assume that a dead thing could still feel. Okay. Yeah. Again, I still, I see the point you're making. Like, yeah, like they were careful about the language, but there's still like framing there, because when you ask like, how does a crocodile feel, and then you ask, how does a dead crocodile feel, well, could you start off with like dead crocodiles and then go to live crocodiles? Because when you start off with a live crocodile, you already have the idea that it has thoughts and feelings, and then when you be like, well, now it's dead, it's like that you're already primed to understand that like it had thoughts and feelings. So again, it's like you're not talking about agent, but you're talking about a living crocodile that has feelings. I don't know if crocodiles have feelings. Like, do I get to judge whether crocodiles have feelings? I mean, I kind of think animals do. But like, again, that already set things up. You wouldn't say that autism thing right now, but it was still popular to say it 10 years ago. Yeah, and this is 18 years ago. So that's like, you can see things are already shifted in how we talk about stuff and we know stuff better now than 18 years ago. Right. People and animals behave through their actions, whereas God is believed to behave through various events. For example, New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin recently made comments which he later retracted, suggesting that Hurricane Katrina was God's wake-up call to African Americans about rampant urban violence. Yeah. Surely God is mad at America. Surely he's not in his quote. Surely he's not approving of us being in Iraq under false pretense. But surely he's upset at Black America also. We're not taking care of ourselves. Yeah, like, okay. Oh, we're going to go. This is like unbelievably ridiculous statements that we say. It's like God's coming after us because of one minority that's like we've been beating up on in this country for like centuries. Lovely. Okay. In the case of people or deities, we appeal to other minds to explain and predict behaviors to understand why others do what they do. Whether you admit it or not, you're just like the rest of us. You've probably asked yourself the question, why me? If you've answered this by saying things happen for a reason, then you're using your everyday social psychology to think about God. Yeah. Yeah. So again, principle of sufficient reason. Things happen for a reason. I deny principle of sufficient reason. I think it's a bad theory. So it's like, yes, if you already have this, yes. If you don't, fuck it. Yeah. So it's like, but it's a teleological thinking that things are sort of going in a certain direction and that like there is a reason for all this stuff. This is a very old idea, you know, a lot of things had this thought to it. Again, that's fine. We've been thinking this way for millennia. Again, that doesn't mean it was like evolved. It just means this is how we started out. The idea that we started out this way doesn't mean it's genetically determined. Okay. Author says, I've experienced firsthand this phenomenon of finding supernatural messages in everyday events. The morning after my mother died, my siblings and I were sitting in our living room, emotionally drained and drowned in our grief. Just then, the wind chimes outside my mother's window started to sound. We looked at one another and the family skeptic, knew exactly what was going on through everyone's heads. That's her. She's telling us not to worry. I knew because I was thinking precisely the same thing. How strange. Although I didn't believe in the afterlife, I still couldn't help but make such an automatic inference about my dead mother's attempts to communicate with me. Again, is he any different from the kid that was making the mistake that they said, oh yeah, well, I'm not. And they were like, oh, haha, that's what the kid's really thinking. But then we in chat were like, no, there's other explanations. It's underdetermined what's going on then. Like, Okay. Author says, from an experimental psychologist perspective, this was very inspiring. The ability to see natural events as symbolic should also bootstrap on stages of cognitive development, such as growing ability to read intentions and desires of others. So naturally, I decided to invite my mother's ghost into my laboratory to see how children of different ages would respond to her antics. Tyrant says, could this be answered by talking to indigenous tribes that aren't connected to the world? No. Because those people, again, they have their own culture, they have their own history. We don't, just because they are separate from us, that doesn't make them more connected with like the genetic history. They've been around just as long as we have, and maybe we can learn something about like what it's like to live in the place that they do and the way that they do, but that doesn't mean it's going to tell us anything about how people were millions of years ago. So it's like, people like to think, oh yeah, they're more primitive, but that's actually not fair. They're not going to be genetically different from us. We were a few thousand years ago. It's just a cultural difference. Like, there's going to be genetic differences, but it's going to be minor in the grand scheme of things. So it's like, we're not going to be able to use people that we just haven't contacted, say from like the Amazon or something, to really go and find anything out. If belief in God is intertwined in our genes, wouldn't they have their own God? Like I said, if it is, then they might have belief in God, but like it wouldn't tell us anything because again, our genes aren't that separate. Yeah. Okay, that's your point. Yeah, but it wouldn't tell you anything then either because we'd still be in the same position that we are. We wouldn't need to go see them to find out belief in God because we're not so different from them because frankly, we only would have split off from them in recent history in terms of human culture. Ivan says, but if most isolated tribes don't believe in God or ghosts, that would be evidence against the thesis. Yeah, and I remember someone going into like one of these tribes and trying to tell them about Jesus and like the tripartite theory of Christian things, where the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And the one of the tribes people were like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That's like something a child would make up. Like that's what the guy said. He's like, that's like a child's theory. Like that's dumb. Like, and the guy was like, yeah, but that's what I believe in. The guy's just like, he's like, that's children's like stories. Yeah. So it's hard to read into what, like separated cultures like believe and stuff. It's like it's a just so story about things that happened a long time ago based on people that are around now and frankly only separated off from the rest of humans at most a few thousand years ago, which is not that long in these timescales. You're looking for evidence against the thesis. It's not that hard evidence against the thesis, if you believe it, is going to be hard. If you just reject it outright like I do, like I don't think the argument is going to hold up because they had too many just so stories. It's like, well, it's just flimsy in my opinion. There's a tribe that has no concept of God. Okay, there we go. So Vipers found one. No one thinks the Holy Trinity makes any intuitive sense. Yeah, but I mean, people claim to it, so I don't know. It's like, yeah, but like the guy again, tribe goes out there. It's meant to be like some sort of like more, give us some sort of outside perspective, and the guy's just like, that's like a little child, like irrational belief. It's like, no, it's like normal people. They're smart. They just, it's like it's a weird theory. Okay, so this guy has invited the ghost of his mother into his lab. Author says, for the sake of the children and their parents, I had to alter my mother's identity somewhat without calling her Princess Alice rather than my dead mother Alice, and telling them she was a friendly magic princess who could make herself invisible. Also, my research assistant had to give her a helping hand in her attempts to communicate, rigging a picture with a magnetic device so that it would fall unexpectedly to the ground, and affixing a remote control adapter to a table lamp so that it would spontaneously flash on and off during the experiment. Okay, so here's a little picture. So like there's Princess Alice up here, and then like stuff would happen and Princess Alice would fall to the ground. After being told that Princess Alice would help them play a game in which they were to guess the location of a ball hidden inside one of two boxes by telling you somehow when you picked the wrong box, only the oldest children in the study, the 7-year-olds, chose the opposite box in response to the unexpected events. One of these second graders even thought that the bell chiming in the nearby university clock tower was Princess Alice talking to him. The 5-year-olds too thought it was Princess Alice doing these things, but they didn't see any communicative attempts in the events. Maybe she thought the picture just looked better on the ground. And so they stuck with their initial choice. They could detect agency but not meaning in the unexpected events. The 3-year-olds only shrugged their shoulders or gave physical explanations for the events, such as the picture not being sticky enough to stay on the door. Alright, so... Okay, Tyrant says the point in making is being is that they do not have a concept of God, that the idea of God is not one we have had genetically. Yeah, again, you can't tell though. Like maybe they've culturally stamped it out. So it's like, yeah. Ivan says regarding the Paraha, however, they do believe in spirits that can sometimes take on the shapes of things in the environment. These spirits can be jaguars, trees, or other visible, tangible things, including people. Okay. MD says, pretty sure it took early Christians 200 plus years to come up with Trinitarian theology. I think they'd agree. Okay, so it's all weird to them. Tyrant says, I'm very new to philosophical ideas and thinking I'm trying to keep in my head. It happens. Yeah, take your time, ask questions. It's cool. Like, yeah, I mean, if you find some people that have no theory of God, then it's not genetic. Well, maybe just like a disease messed with their genes like 1,000 years ago and it got stamped out. Like there's too many factors going on to like know. It's all just those stories at this point. MDD says it definitely came from a committee. Yeah. MDD says it was a conceptual explanation that attempted to make sense of the events that happened prior. Scripture handed them and other revelations about God. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason we did this. Like, whoever did it. But who knows? I mean, you'd have to go be like a history of Christianity to, I'm sure, figure out exactly why and how, and then look at the theology over time. I mean, I'm sure it's an interesting story. Okay. Yeah, so the 3-year-olds could say, oh, she did it, but they couldn't figure out that like she was trying to help them. Unlike the puppet show study, the children here were more susceptible to attributing abilities to supernatural agents because in this case, it required that they had developed cognitively to have what's called second-order reasoning. They had to be able to understand that Alice knows that I don't know where the ball is in order to be susceptible to hidden messages. Yeah, that's true. They had to know that Alice knew something that they didn't know about them. Yeah, Viper says, again, he's not saying religion is hard-coded into our genetics. He's saying that due to pre-existing systems, we're predisposed to develop a belief in invisible agents to explain the unexplained. Yeah, that's like the best case scenario here. But again, it's... I mean, that's fair. It's fair. I mean, I don't quite love it. It's saying basically... I don't think he's kind of saying it's hard, not religion's hard-coded, but belief in like an afterlife is hard-coded. It's basically very close. So, I mean, you're splitting a little bit of hairs to get this together. But again, they're saying he's trying to soften the blow of saying like we believe in God genetically, but calling it an exaptation, that's already biasing it to make it sound easier. He can't tell you why exactly we had this genetics. He can't go back in history and say, oh, it wasn't on purpose. It was something else. He can't do that. It's a just so story. So it's like, yes, but like also you can't like just soften the blow like for everything. I agree. Is it better for us to attribute agency in a scary world? Sure, that's fine. Like, we have to be able to be more worried about dangers in the world, and that we have to account for them, than we have to be like, just think everything's safe, because if we got hurt back in the day before we had medicine, we were dead. So that's easy. Frank says, if you think it's fine to have conflicting beliefs, you just have to have conflicting beliefs. But if you think all your beliefs need to hold together rationally, you have to rationalize the hell out of them. A trinity is exactly the kind of twisty rationalization. Yeah. It might be rustling leaves, but also it might be a fucking tiger run. Yes, exactly. It might be the wind. And Tyrant agrees with Frank. Frank tends to make lots of sense. But again, there's a big difference between attributing mind more promiscuously, just all over the place, and being like, God is in your genes. And this is God. If you're trying to get away from saying God is in your genes, that's going to be like walking back. If he doesn't say that, that's walking back most of what this paper's been saying. Okay. So just what was my mother trying to tell me from beyond the grave anyhow? Although it's open for debate, I interpreted her message as follows. When combined with a cognitively ripe enough mind, and when the emotional climate is just right, there is no shape that evidence cannot assume in order to tempt the most recalcitrant of skeptics. In other words, if one such wide-eyed little disbeliever who had just seen the lights inexplicably flicker says, quote, I thought invisible was just make-believe, maybe it is real. Okay, yeah, it's like, okay, maybe it's real. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, so the Trinity came from a committee. I believe they're quite open about it. I just wanted to point out that considering crazy history of schisms, heresies, and debates in the first few hundred years of Christianity, anyone even slightly acquainted with theology and its history would 100% agree with what I'm saying. Yeah. Well, history of religion is not usually what people are like, oh, yeah, it's just, that's what we believe. Well, things were crazy enough. I feel like it's unethical to fake ghosts for kids. Yeah. I'm wondering about the ethics of this one. It's like, now the kid's going to be like, well, I'm sure like the parents will be like, oh yeah, we're going to fake ghosts. Like, yeah, like little kids like Tooth Fairy, Santa, not that big of a deal, but still. Belfast's kids ain't afraid of no ghost. Yeah, I mean, people who grew up around explosions, like, they might be a little desensitized. Just English. The English are coming, oh God. All right. Some investigators, such as Justin Barrett of the Institute of Cognition and Culture in Belfast and Scott Atran of the University of Michigan, theorize that there are evolutionarily advantageous reasons for such a ready susceptibility to believing that any activity in the environment was actively caused by some kind of agent. Yeah, I'm completely okay with this one. It is better for children to mistake a branch falling in the forest for a predator than it is for them to misinterpret signs of danger as a product of weather, for instance. Such hypervigilance mechanisms kept people alert and ready, but they may also make them overly inclined to attribute natural event as some kind of intentional act. Ivan Neo says, this paper is not directly arguing God doesn't exist. It's arguing that due to evolution and acceptation, we would believe in gods whether or not they exist. Yes. An IRA joke, you just yes. Sorry about the IRA jokes. Luminance showed up just in time for the end again. Yeah. How you doing, Luminance? Yeah, I mean, we're getting on 3 hours. I'm losing my brain. It happens. I mean, I just made an IRA joke. So. Anyone doesn't know Luminance has been streaming philosophy. Luminance a shout out. Luminance is a continental philosopher, so not like me in terms of like shooting down analytic arguments, like, slicing and dicing these things. But like, yeah, you want to go talk some Heidegger? You want to go talk some Sartre? You want to go talk existentialism? And you go, thank you, Vipers. Yeah, I'm not sorry, Tyrant. Paper is about God. This paper is arguing that we are genetically disposed in believing that God exists. So it's a genetic argument in the afterlife and God. Now, like they just said here, basically, I think we're genetically disposed to like treating agency, like being very suspicious, hypervigilant of the world. I think that's fine. I think the more general point here that like we are evolved to believe in God, like I find that a little weak, but whatever. Yeah. Okay, and we'll just get into the end. It's like the last, column here. Okay, increasing impact. It is clear that when it comes to the big questions in life, our brains have evolved so that science eludes us, but religion comes naturally. There are still many pieces to fill in on the big picture of human cognition evolution as it relates to supernatural beliefs, but I believe that this area of research could have a positive impact on society. Bringing such discussions into a context where they could be understood by a large range of people could have immense benefits in decreasing the divide that many people feel separates science from everyday life. There are a number of scholars currently working on novel evolutionary theories of religion, but there are also a lot of exciting discoveries taking place in this field that have yet to strike the right chord with the educated public. I recently taught a graduate seminar on this topic by starting off with Boyer's excellent book, Religion Explained, which uses numerous anthropological examples to account for the origins of religious thought. Tyrant says, unethical answer is to take a group of kids with no concept of God and grapes of wrathing them into godless adulthood. You know, it's happened. The communists in, I think, Russia, was it Russia or China? I don't know. But like they banned religion. So it's like there were countries where religion was banned because the communism that they were using said that religion was bad. So we can look at actually what happened. So when the government was enforcing a non-religious point of view. Yeah. What does religious thought mean in this case? Basically believe in God. They're saying we are genetically disposed to believe in God. Do the popes, John Hannity and Thomas Aquinas, all have the same religious thought? Yeah, no. I mean, this is just, it's basically beliefs in like afterlife, consciousness, dualism. The problem that was going on before, I was going to say it later. It was Stalin. Thank you, Vipers. Was that, what was I going to say? Oh, that they were making dualist claims. I'm like, dualism has been around in the modern form for only 500 years since Descartes, and they were trying to use dualism like it was some sort of fundamental thing. I'm like, that didn't exist 1,000 years ago. It didn't exist 2,000 years ago. So calling it like the default just doesn't make sense. Yeah. Thank you for the link too. MD says, I feel like they'd still be exposed to religion just under the pretext religion bad. Yeah, but you'd have to look it up. But I mean, it's a big country and they were in power for a while. So like this actually, you can look at that stuff. You would think that the Pope and Aquinas have the same religious thought. I very much doubt that. There's a lot of distance between Aquinas and the Pope in time and theology. So I don't know if it's exactly the same. I mean, maybe more similar than others, but I doubt that it's like the same religious thought. All right, so one student told the author, it's all good in theory and maybe it does explain religion, but I can't see what it has to do with my belief in God, end quote. Although it is absolutely critical to study a variety of cultures and different species if one aims to illustrate the commonalities of behavior across seemingly diverse groups, researchers in this area should increasingly begin talking about God and Western souls rather than, for instance, the ancestral spirits of the Tupi peoples or the concept of evil among the Igbo of Nigeria. Meant the Lord of the Flying them into godless adulthood? Oh, I don't know what that is, but okay. Yeah, distance in time is what Luminance says. Yeah, distance time was thinking. Who the Pope has studied Aquinas. Yeah. Thomism is the philosophy of the Catholic Church. Fair, but again, things do change over time. Yeah, so swap it for the difference between the Dalai Lama and Aquinas. Yeah. These are like people, like philosophy does change. Like human thought, like this is why like there's continental philosophers. This is why there's classic people who are like our buddy Aris. He is a classicist. He studies ancient Greek thought mostly. It is different from how we think about things. Even if we can still talk about the same ideas, the differences matter. Like 2,000 years does matter to how we view the world. Like it's not as trivial as you think. Even though we can read them and understand them, it's very different. And you don't realize it until you get into it, but that's why people stick to it, because they get into it and they're like, oh my God, these people really are smart, but they're also really different from us, and it's interesting. Yeah, Lord of the Flies. Okay. Yeah. Like, Put them in a little, have at it, kids. Yeah. Yeah, I know the Lords of Flies. I just didn't put it together. Sorry. The book. I'm going to tell you, you call him classes? Well, he's not, he is it's what he does. He's an Aristotelian. Classicist, not a classist. Yes. All right, let's finish up the last paragraph. Author says, if one could answer what have traditionally been solely philosophical questions using testable means and place the results in a plausible theoretical context, areas that have historically been out of bounds for scientists could be rightfully claimed by psychological science. Despite the social quagmire surrounding all things religious, the religious study of supernatural beliefs could be necessary for complete understanding of human cognitive development. I believe that these new applications of cognitive science are particularly important to human understanding. Perhaps this field of experimental research has the potential to teach us, with minimal human bias, how we really truly fit as individual souls in this world. Okay, let's see. How are we going to rate this? Everyone here now is welcome to rate the paper. And if you think this paper had fun ideas, you type in brain dance, as it says there, small b, big D. If you think it made big claims that shriveled up at the end, you do nog grapes, because like they shrivel up into raisins. Nog navel, if it's only for academics. This was a public piece. It was, definitely written for the general public. So I don't know if there'll be too many nog navels, but if you feel like doing it, I'm not stopping you. Ouroboros for deep ancient ideas. So if you thought this had like deep old ideas, Ouroboros. Nog extreme for existential or artistic drama. Nog turd, all style, no substance, still poop underneath. Nog knife for slicing and dicing arguments. And there's also the global vote yay, vote nay, and we also have a vote meh here. So thank you, Read and Rap. So what am I going to say? All right. What am I going to say? Well, I don't want to bias this too bad by framing effects. So Viper says it was fun, old ideas, a little bit of existential, like what are we going to do with life, and a vote yay. Ivan also gives it a vote yay. We got a bunch of brain dances and a slicing and dicing argument. Not bad. Yeah, I mean, this was very science-y. This is written from a psychological point of view for the popular stuff, but talking about like actual studies and how that works. So yeah. Let's see who else is going to get in. I'm trying to think what I want to say. They had some fun pictures here. It's always good. Yeah, so I'm trying to crib off you. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. I'm stealing ideas here. We got an MDD. Thank you for rating. We got a brain dance and Ouroboros and a meh. I'm thinking of much more meh about this. Like, these arguments, as I was saying, like, I am not impressed with these arguments. I've seen all these arguments. It's like, oh, yes. Because there was that one time where they just went just so story for a while. They said, like, this, therefore, and also you do a little bit of logic, and people obviously assume this. And I'm like, you can't do that. Like, you just can't do that, like, in my world. Like, you can say that sort of stuff, but, like, I'm not going to be convinced in the littlest about that. So it's like, this is the sort of like, I don't, like, it doesn't affect me. It's like, yeah, you're going to believe this is a very nice story. It's a nice just so story. That's great. But if you're talking to me in like like with my philosopher hat on, it's like, well, you can have your just so story, but you can keep it. Yeah. Doing a bit at the end, narrowing the divide was either optimistic or insincere. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to give it a nog grapes. Frank says a yay and nay was fun, drawing conclusions a bit too aggressively. Yeah, I'm not grapesing it for that. I think at the beginning when they were saying we were genetically disposed to believe in God, that like did not pan out. I completely agree, genetically disposed to believe, like attributing agency very readily. I think that's fine. But I don't think that's anywhere near as close to saying we're genetically disposed to belief in an afterlife. Yeah. You may recommend one, I may not take it. Like, so yeah. It gives a lot to argue with, so I'm going to give it a nog grapes. What else am I going to do? Let's see. Yeah, we're going to give it an Ouroboros, because I don't usually use that one. But like this is trying to get into like some old ideas and stuff. So we're gonna give it a grapes and Ouroboros. Am I gonna give it a yay or a meh? Ivan says, I mean, the inferential strength of the argument is not bad for what it is. That's fair. As a direct argument against God, it's a bit weak. I mean, it wasn't a direct argument against God. It's just saying this is a plausible alternative way that we could believe in God. So I don't think it is an argument against God. But yeah, it's an alternative. So it is a bit of an argument against it. It's just trying to give you a just so story. It raises the likelihood of God reports in the event God doesn't exist. Yes, God reports. Amy C3, she does topics often intersect with political philosophy and housing. All right, I'll take a look. Well, a little bit on the fence here. Let's go vote yay because I mean it was well done, and I'm not angry with this. So it's got a. Let's see. Is that? I mean, I feel okay about this rating. It's like I feel like it's a good article. It was popular. It did a nice enough job. They mostly made their case. I mean, I have a lot of gripes, but I mean, as a philosopher. And like when a psychologist is going to be talking about like philosophy stuff, I'm going to be shitting on it no matter what. So take myself out of it a little bit. It was what they did pretty well. It was okay. It's like, yeah, it's a nice read. Wasn't super deep or anything. Yeah. Frank, where's Frank going? Frank goes everywhere. Weber says basically the theory of mind was developed as hypervigilance. The theory of mind is cognitive default before we learn about death. Because our default, lives of dead people, we believe in the afterlife. It's like, yeah, the problem is that the last step right there is like, okay, so we end up doing that, but it's like, okay, but what's that matter at that point? It's like, okay, we end up over attributing mind. So it's like, all right, but so what? It's like, is there anything to learn there? Not so sure there's anything to be learned. It's not as good as Bayesian evolution argument against design. No.